legislation, you're supporting Canadians, Mr. Speaker, because this legislation is a reflection in terms of what it is that Canadians want to see put into law. While I'm on that point, I would suggest to the Conservatives that there's legislation that I know at least they say they support. Let's see if we can stop the filibustering here in the chamber so that we can pass additional legislation so that Canadians will even be better served by the House of Commons. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member will have 7 minutes coming to him when we resume debate on this topic. We'll now go on to statements by members. Déclaration des députés. L'honorable.
The honourable member for Richmond-Arthabaska. Mr. Speaker, the parliamentary session will come to an end in a few days, as you know. It's already in a busy time for primary and secondary schools across the country, with the end of the school year fast approaching for thousands of young people. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity to extend my heartfelt thanks to all our teachers, professionals, support staff, administrators, and principals for the work they do every day. They are passionate, hardworking people who work countless hours to educate and train our future plumbers, electricians, psychologists, doctors, entrepreneurs, educators, lawyers, and managers, to name but a few. Thank you for all you do. Our children, our beautiful youth, our future are in good hands with you. I wish you all a happy end of the year and an energizing summer break to come back in great shape next year. Thank you.
The honourable member for Kitchener South Hespeler.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to extend my heartfelt congratulations to Nicholas Hague and the Vegas Golden Knights on their remarkable triumph in winning the Stanley Cup. Nicholas, a Kitchener native, has achieved what many young Canadians dream of doing, hoisting the Stanley Cup. In this achievement, he will not only have his name etched among the greatest names in hockey, but will also inspire countless young athletes to dream big and strive for greatness. This triumph reminds us all of the indomitable spirit of hockey and the power it holds to unite communities. We look forward to Nicholas visiting Kitchener with Stanley. The citizens of Kitchener are truly having an incredible week, with 2 local sports heroes reaching the pinnacle of success by winning the National Professional Trophy in their chosen sports. First the NBA, and now the Stanley Cup. On behalf of this House, I extend our warmest congratulations to Nicholas Hague and Jamal Murray on their amazing accomplishments. May these victories be a source of great pride and joy, and may they serve as a reminder of the immeasurable value of teamwork, determination, and the pursuit of excellence.
The honourable member for Saskatoon University.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to talk about a citizen of Saskatoon who has passed on but will never be forgotten. Saeed Shah came here in 1982. For the next 40 years, this was his city. And it was his home, and he worked tirelessly to make it a better place for everyone. He was a pillar in the Amadea community and played a key role in welcoming many newcomers throughout the years, and was known for his hospitality for new and old alike. He was involved in the construction of 3 mosques in the province, Mr. Speaker. Building a mosque in Saskatoon was always a lifetime goal of his. And he built an amazing one, Mr. Speaker. He encouraged people of different backgrounds and faiths to get to know each other in order to build a more peaceful society. And he centered the community around these values. He was a father figure for the Amadea community of Saskatoon and an important pillar of the broader Saskatoon community, which was reflected in the many dignitaries who attended his funeral. I believe in his legacy he will live on, and hope we can continue to unite people around the morals of love and harmony preached by him and the Amadea community. Love for all, hatred for none. Rest in peace, my friend.
I'm going to ask the Sergeant-at-Arms to maybe just check outside, because there's noise coming, and it's not from in the chamber. It's in the hallway outside, so if you can just take a look out there and maybe make sure that it quiets down, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. The honourable member for Brampton South.
Mr. Speaker. As summer approaches and the sun shines brighter, I'm looking forward to the opportunities that lie ahead for active living in our communities. On the weekend, I joined the 9th annual Bike the Creek Ride, a celebration of the joys of cycling and our environment. I want to recognize the team at Bike Brampton, including David and Dale Lang, the Walnut Foundation, and Lyndon King, who organized a walkathon for men's health, EcoSig, Credit Valley, and Toronto Conservation Authorities, encouraging people to plant trees, and various seniors clubs keeping seniors active in Brampton. I'm particularly excited about the upcoming Sun Life Walk to Cure Diabetes with the JDRF in Peel. These events carry a powerful message. The benefits of active living are important for building a healthy and sustainable community. As we eagerly await the arrival of summer, let's seize the opportunity to embrace active living. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Shefford. Mr. Speaker, on this World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, I would like to express my firm commitment to protecting and respecting the rights of the elderly. Approximately 1 in 6 people over the age of 60 suffered some form of abuse in 2022. Elder abuse is a worrying reality that requires a collective response. There are many types of elder abuse, including ageism, which is one of the most common forms of discrimination. With Bill C-319 we are breaking down this age barrier by increasing OAS for all seniors over 65. It's an important day in Quebec, which already has an action plan to combat elder abuse. With greater health transfers, Quebec could do more. Together, we must strive to create a society that respects and protects seniors. On Purple Ribbon Day, let's commit to promoting the dignity and well-being of our seniors. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges. Mr. Speaker, all fathers who are celebrating their first Father's Day or their 50th Father's Day, to the new fathers who look at their little boy's face knowing that their priorities will never be the same, to fathers who work extra hours so their kids can go to summer camp for the first time, to the fathers who hurried home after a long day to tell their children bedtime stories,
to the dads who just walked their daughter that they used to carry on their shoulders down the aisle and they're wondering where the time went, to the dads who didn't know if they'd make it through the week and are still wondering if they will, to the dads who walked into their first or their 100th AA or GA meeting because they knew it was the only way. To the dads who aren't perfect, but are trying to be better men, husbands and fathers day in and day out. And Mr. Speaker, to all the dads, the uncles, the big brothers and mentors who know that fatherhood runs deeper than blood and who have opened their heart and their lives to children who no longer have a dad to call their own, I say, Happy Father's Day, bonne fête des pères.
The Honourable Member for Moose Jaw Lake Centre, Lanigan.
Mr. Speaker, Saskatchewan did not have an NHL team. However, in 2017, 2 young men from Saskatchewan, Justin Reeves and Greg Moore, made a social media plea to adopt the Vegas Golden Knights as Saskatchewan's team. At that same time, a young man named Brett Howden was playing and captain for the Moose Jaw Warriors. Brett was a hard-nosed center on the ice, and he fought hard for his teammates. Off the ice, he would bring players from the team to play floor hockey with the Special Olympic athletes in Moose Jaw. How he and his teammates were able to walk away after getting roughed up by them, I'll never know. Brett knew what it was to give to the community that he lived and played in. There is a saying in Special Olympics, let me win, but if I cannot win, let me be brave in the attempt. On Tuesday night, Brett Howden got his due reward and became a Stanley Cup champion with the Vegas Golden Knights. On behalf of Moose Jaw, the Moose Jaw Special Olympics, and every Saskatchewanian who adopted Vegas as our NHL team, congratulations. And Mr. Speaker, I'd like to point out that I work with his brother-in-law.
The Honourable Member for Niagara Centre.
Mr. Speaker, we believe in our hearts that if our loved ones were ever in danger, we would do whatever was necessary to keep them safe. But how far would we be willing to go to help someone we didn't know? Would we charge through the front door of a burning house to search for someone caught in the flames? Would we be willing to breathe air loaded with soot and ash, knowing it could shorten our lives? How far would any of us go? What risk would we take? Welland firefighter Captain Craig O.P. Bowman knew the answer to that question. And because of his courage and firefighters like him, few of us will ever face those kinds of decisions. On May 21st, 2023, Captain Bowman lost his life after a courageous battle with occupational illness. His wife, Allison, and children, Alexis and Colin, have suffered an enormous loss, but so many others have been spared that pain because of the bravery of firefighters like Craig Bowman. On behalf of the people of Canada, thank you for your service, Captain Bowman. Rest in peace, my friend.
The honourable member for Mississauga, Erin Mills.
Mr. Speaker, we stand on the shoulders of giants as we inch towards progress. I stand today to recognize these giants, our seniors, who deserve to live with respect and with dignity. Today, on World Elder Abuse Day, it is crucial to raise awareness about the well-being of our seniors and to provide them with the quality support that they need. Elder abuse can take many forms, whether it be physical, psychological, neglect. We all have a role to play in fostering a culture of dignity and to watch for warning signs. This also includes supporting them as our government has done through Budget 2023 and our New Horizons program to ensure that our seniors and our elders have proper access to opportunities to actively participate in our society. Today and every day, Mr. Speaker, let us recognize the many contributions our elders have made to Canada and that we cherish their health and their security. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for King Vaughan.
Signor Presidente, it's an honor to raise today to celebrate Italian Heritage Month. I am one of over 94,000 Italian Canadians living in King Vaughan. Many Italian immigrants, including my grandparents, came to Canada with enthusiasm and a desire to achieve their goals. They went on to succeed in business, education, entrepreneurship, and community leadership, establishing the groundwork for future generations while fostering a deep love for Canada. The Italian language, the language of love and passion, is spoken by many across Canada. This month, we honor Italians across Canada for their contribution to the development of this country. Voglio ringraziare tutti gli italiani nel nostro community di King Vaughan e tutto il paese. Rose, rose per te, ho comprato stasera e mil cuore il so, cosa voglio di te.
The honourable member for York Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a tough act to follow. Mr. Speaker, it's always a pleasure to welcome the next generation of leaders to Parliament. 2 weeks ago, the Shalhevet Montessori Jewish Day School came to Parliament, and it was wonderful to exchange with these young change makers and answer their questions, their terrific questions. But today, Mr. Speaker, I welcome the next generation of women leaders from the Eitzheim Girls' School to Parliament to see and learn how their house and their democratic institutions that we all cherish, how they work and how they can engage with them. The month of June marks graduation season for our students from coast to coast to coast, and the resumption of grad trips that are the milestones of youth exploring our great country. Our students visit Ottawa to learn about their democratic institutions and nurture their curiosity. I'd like to pay a special tribute to every teacher who has inspired our kids and prepared them for a bright future. Congratulations to all of our graduates. We are proud of all you've accomplished. Yasher Koach.
Nice job. The honourable member for Battle River, Crowfoot.
Mr. Speaker, it used to be that if somebody worked hard, you could live a good life here in Canada. You could own a home, drive a reliable vehicle, afford groceries, and even save up to go on the occasional holiday. All of things aren't luxuries and shouldn't be items reserved for elites and trust fund beneficiaries. But the reality is, for far too many Canadians, is these things are now out of reach. More and more Canadians are canceling their vacations, going without the necessities, or accessing food banks, and have totally given up on the dream of ever owning a home. One must ask the question, why? Well, the answer is simple. The Liberal NDP policies are to blame. Things like the carbon tax, a tax on Canada's most productive sectors, gatekeepers reducing productivity, and inflationary spending that diminishes the purchasing power of Canadians. It's time for better, and the leader of Canada's Conservatives and his team from across the country are ready to roll up our sleeves and get to work to make sure that we axe the tax, make work count again, and bring home a Canada that works for all Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf, Jacques Cartier. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In addition to struggling to make ends meet due to inflation caused by this government's economic policy, Canadians are facing another problem. As you know, in Quebec, July 1st is Moving Day. This year, things are dramatic. Here's the history of an honest citizen from Trois-Rivières who was forced to camp out in the woods because of the lack of accessible housing. Richard Dufault, a 74-year-old man, cannot find a place to live. And here's what he has told TVA Nouvelle. I visited some 15 housing units, but I've never been able to get a rental. No matter how many landlords I meet, they take my contact information, but they don't call me back. And if they do, they tell me it's rented. Trois-Rivières has one of the lowest rental vacancy rates in Quebec. To achieve a balanced market, CMHC has indicated that the vacancy rate must be around 3%. It's unacceptable for this to happen in Canada in 2023. Why is this government, which has been in power for 8 years, letting down these seniors? The Honourable Member. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On June 6th, the Seniors Roundtable, Vivre and Vieillir à Rosemont, celebrated its 25th anniversary. Today, this citizens' initiative brings together more than 20 players representing the community, 3 levels of local elected officials and citizens, all of whom are committed to the well-being of seniors in my riding and that of my colleague, Alexandre Boulris. I would like to highlight all of the work carried out by Vivre et Vieillir en Rosemont over the past 25 years. They continue to fight against elder abuse, and since 2010, they have been organizing events around this day to raise awareness in this issue, which is still very relevant. They also contribute to the quality of life to all too forgotten portion of our population and fight the isolation of seniors. I'd like to thank all of the members for their dedication. Thank you.
If I can have your attention, I just want to remind everyone that SO31s are taking place, and we want to hear what's going on in people's ridings. So if you're talking to each other, please try to whisper, and if there's something funny, please suppress your loud laughs.
The Honourable Member for Algoma, Manitoulin, Kapuskasing.
Mr. Speaker, constituents from Elliott Lake are demanding action from Natural Resources Canada and the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission to clean up radioactive waste found at their homes in Elliott Lake. This waste from closed uranium mines was widely used as fill for constructions in the 1960s. Sans savoir, ces familles ont...
Unknowingly, these families are exposed to radiation levels that exceed authorized thresholds due to mining waste buried on their property.
There's a duty to ensure that all radioactive waste in Canada is managed, isolated from the public, and safely stored for generations to come. This is the approach embraced by Natural Resources Canada's radioactive waste policy, and yet these families' requests for action have been denied. It's imperative that this decades-long issue be permanently fixed. It shouldn't be a family's responsibility to deal with radioactive waste, nor bear the burden of health risk caused by the uranium mining industry. Jennifer, Lisa, Kathleen, Margaret, and Pamela are asking that this radioactive waste be removed from their properties, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Rimouski, Nejet, Témiscouata-les-Basques. Mr. Speaker, ACFAS, the French-Canadian Association for the Advancement of Science, is celebrating its 100th anniversary. ACFAS was founded in 1923 by a generation of Quebec pioneers, including botanists Marie Victorien and Jacques Rousseau and radiologist Léo Parizeau. In a powerful gesture of national affirmation, these visionaries wanted to endow the Quebec nation with a strong, united French-speaking scientific organization. They understood that a people's territorial, economic, and national sovereignty had to include its scientific sovereignty. Over 100 years later, ACFAS proudly pursues its mission to promote, disseminate, and enhance French language science in Quebec and throughout the French-speaking world. More than ever, its work is of crucial importance to our French-speaking researchers. Mr. Speaker, I invite all colleagues to add their voices to mine.
Vive la science! Vive l'ACFAS!
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Canadians have come to learn that the Minister for Public Safety has a complicated relationship with the truth, and they're taking notice. He said law enforcement asked him to trigger the Emergencies Act, but that's not true. He backdated documents to mislead a federal judge, but he dated it April 31st, and he was found out. He said the Liberal gun grab didn't target law-abiding gun owners, but that's also not true. He said that CSIS didn't share intelligence that Canadian lawmakers were being targeted by foreign dictatorships. That's also not true. And he said that his government had shut down the Beijing-run police stations here in Canada. Guess what? Not true. Canadians have come to learn that they just can't believe him. So when he said he didn't know that notorious serial killer and rapist Paul Bernardo was being transferred to less restrictive conditions and to medium security, the truth got in the way again. We know the minister was informed. We know the Prime Minister was informed. The minister needs to do what's right. He needs to be responsible and accountable. He needs to resign today.
The honourable member for Halifax.
Mr. Speaker, the Canadian Armed Forces serve our country at home and abroad, promoting peace and security, responding to disasters, humanitarian crises, and defending our interests. Right. As MP for Halifax, home to CFB Halifax, Canada's largest military base and home to our Navy's Atlantic Fleet, I've seen up close the skill and dedication of our forces. Whether responding to Hurricane Fiona or departing Halifax for operations around the world, CAF members always answer the call of duty. That's right. We owe them our most enthusiastic gratitude. That's why I'm pleased to announce the inaugural Halifax International Fleet Week will be taking place this September 7th to 10th. A partnership, yes indeed, a partnership between the civilian community and the Canadian Armed Forces. Fleet Week will showcase Canada's proud maritime heritage with a wide array of activities, including ships parades and tours, interactive demonstrations, and more. A number of our NATO allies will also participate, giving Fleet Week international significance as well. So, Mr. Speaker, I invite everyone to join me in Halifax this September for the first Halifax International Fleet Week. Hear, hear.
Oral questions. Question orale. The honourable Leader of the Opposition.
We now know why the Prime Minister did not fire his Minister of Public Safety, his minister who is misleading and incompetent. Here's why. Because the Prime Minister himself is the one who approved the transfer of Paul Bernardo to a minimum security prison with more freedoms and more comforts in that prison. The Prime Minister is in Ottawa today, so does he have the courage to stand up and explain to the victims of Paul Bernardo why he wanted to give more freedoms and comforts to that monster? The Honourable Government Leader in the House. Mr. Speaker, the crimes in question were despicable, unspeakable. There are no words to describe how awful it was. Everyone in Canada was affected by these crimes. The families were traumatized by these crimes. The Prime Minister. Well, first, Mr. Speaker, I would like to say that the Correctional Service of Canada is fully independent, and we cannot have political interference in our corrections.
Why the Prime Minister refuses to fire his incompetent and misleading public safety minister, and it is that the Prime Minister himself was the one who accepted the transfer of Paul Bernardo from a maximum security prison to a medium security prison where he would have access to human interaction, more freedom, and more comfort. His office knew 3 months beforehand, and his cabinet has the power to direct the correctional authorities to keep mass murderers in maximum security prisons. Will the Prime Minister show the courage to stand on his feet and explain to victims of Paul Bernardo why he wanted to give this monster more freedom and comfort?
Yes.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, first of all, Mr. Speaker, the idea that anybody in this House would have any sympathy for the monstrous acts that were committed is absolutely repugnant. The second thing that I will say, Mr. Speaker, is that it's unfortunate that the Leader of the Opposition mischaracterized what happened. He knows very well that Correctional Services Canada makes those decisions independently. He knows very well as well, Mr. Speaker, that we have a system we're not supposed to interfere politically with that. Mr. Speaker, it is true in March that staff were informed of the possibility. It wasn't until that possibility was confirmed that they informed the Prime Minister at the end of May.
Well, Leader of the Opposition.
Based on that account, the Prime Minister knew the day of the transfer, and his office knew 3 months earlier. The government has in the past issued directives to correction services on what should be done with various classes of prisoners, like by forcing those with contraband into dry prison cells, for example. In other words, they do have the power to direct corrections on these issues. The Prime Minister and his office knew for 3 months. Given that he's here in Ottawa today, does he have the courage to explain his decision to let this monster go out of a maximum security penitentiary? Yes or no?
Opposition officer who I know cares as deeply about the gravity of those crimes and the impact on the families as I do. I know he cares as deeply about what we're going to do for Canadians on that. I also know that he knows the independence of our correctional services system. I know that he also knows that we're not supposed to interfere politically. And so I would ask him to work collaboratively with us to find a way where we don't politicize Correctional Services Canada, and we work together to make sure that the families who are impacted in crimes of this nature are taken care of, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I look across at the Prime Minister's seat. I know that he is in Ottawa today, and if he had the courage, he would be standing to answer these questions directly.
No, I just want to remind the honourable members that we can't do indirectly what we do directly. So let him continue.
And I take the House Leader up on his challenge to work with us. We have a bill that would make sure every mass murderer stays in a maximum security penitentiary. It's before the House. Will the government pass it with unanimous consent today?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
So first of all, Mr. Speaker, I would say that I look directly at the Leader of the Official Opposition for a reason. I look at him for a reason because when we're dealing with something as serious and as brutal as the crimes that occurred in a community that was right next to mine, that I felt viscerally that the conversation that we have has to be measured, it has to be based on cooperation, and frankly, Mr. Speaker, based on the underlying premise that every member cares equally and deeply about this, about two things, about the victims absolutely, but also about not politicizing our correctional services system.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I take the House Leader at his word that he is equally horrified with this monster and that he wants to do something. But I take him at his word when he says he wants to work with us to reverse this transfer and put this monster back in a maximum security penitentiary. The good news is that he can do that today. The Conservative member for Niagara Falls, who represents many of the family and friends of the victims, has a bill that would ensure that every single mass murderer stays in a maximum security penitentiary forever. Will the government commit to passing it with unanimous consent and send Paul Bernardo back to maximum security penitentiary?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, we are, in all instances, ready to have a conversation about how we don't politicize our correctional services, about how we ensure that we take care of victims and their families. And, Mr. Speaker, there is a review of the decision that was made by Correctional Services. It's going to be completed in 2 weeks. I would suggest that we take a look at that, and I would also suggest that when we're dealing with something as major as changing our correctional services system, that it deserves discussion, it deserves the ability for it to be examined by all parliamentarians, and to make sure that we don't create unintended consequences, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, a commission of inquiry into Chinese interference must be established before the end of the session. Why? Because investigations take time, and we've already wasted too much time. If we want to reassure the public, we need to get to the bottom of the interference in the last elections before the next election. That is the only way to assure the public of the probity of the next federal election. So I appeal to my colleagues' statesmanship. Time is running out. Will they announce a public and independent commission of inquiry before the end of the session? The Honourable Public Safety Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'm very encouraged by the exchanges between my colleague, the Minister for Intergovernmental Affairs, and the Bloc Québécois and the NDP. I hope that conversations will occur with the Conservatives as well. This fight, the fight against foreign interference, is not a partisan one. We need to do this work together. That way, we can create new powers, we can add resources. This will help in the fight against foreign interference, and that's what's most important. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, at this point, my colleagues will have understood that the Bloc Québécois will not let this one go. The public's trust in democracy is at stake. The public is calling for a public and independent commission of inquiry. Its commissioner must be approved by this House. And the commission will have to report on its work not in 5 years, not in 2 years, but in the next few months. It's a huge undertaking, Mr. Speaker. We know that. That's why we're working with the government. The government knows that it's a huge undertaking, too. We have our work cut out for us. So, will the government announce this commission? The Honourable Minister. First, Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank my colleague for her teamwork. The option of a public inquiry is still an option on the table, as my colleague is currently negotiating with the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs. What's most important is that we work together with Canadians in order to create new authorities to protect not only our democratic institutions, but Canadians themselves, too.
Burnaby.
Le ministre de la Sécurité.
The Public Safety Minister, the President of the Privy Council, the Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Prime Minister, what do they all have in common? Well, apparently they're all unable to read their emails. It's becoming a dangerous trend. Is this government aware of the trauma that it is making the victims' families relive? They were victims of one of the worst killers in Canadian history. The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, absolutely, these crimes were probably the worst in Canada. They're incredibly serious. But it's also very important to note that our correctional service must be independent. We received information that there was a possibility that the individual in question might be transferred, but we only received that information after all the details had been confirmed. That's when the Prime Minister received the information, at the end, after.
Now, Mr.
The Honourable Member for New Westminster Burnaby.
After fiasco with this government, the level of disorganization and negligence from Liberal ministers is often appalling. After the Public Security Minister has failed to be informed of the transfer of one of the most brutal criminals in Canadian history, we now know that the Prime Minister's office was informed 3 months ago. They could have used that time to ensure victims' families were warned. How does this keep happening on such serious files? Why are they showing such clear incompetence? When will they fix this?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, as I stated, in March, staff were informed of the possibility. There were still many details that were not certain, the possibility of a transfer. It wasn't until the end of May, once the details were confirmed, that the Prime Minister was briefed. And what I would say to the member opposite who knows that Correctional Services is independent and that decisions must not be made with political interference is I would say to him that we have to have a conversation as a House about how we not interfere with correctional services in Canada, but also make sure that a transfer of this nature doesn't occur. And that needs to be a mature conversation that doesn't involve a lot of politics, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Peterborough-Kawartha.
Mr. Speaker, just when you think things can't get any worse with this Liberal government, the Prime Minister says, hold my beer. For 3 months, because it's a game to this Prime Minister, that's what this is. For 3 months, the Public Safety Minister knew that child murderer and Scarborough rapist Paul Bernardo was being moved from maximum to medium security prison and did nothing. Now, we know the Prime Minister also knew for 3 months and also did nothing. This isn't a game. Incompetence does not even begin to describe this leadership. Canadians deserve better, and these victims' families deserve better. So, will the Public Safety Minister...
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know the member from Peterborough well, but I do know that she's very sincere when she cares about these cases, as she would know that the Prime Minister would be deeply impacted as a father and as a Canadian by the horror of these crimes. Any assertion to the opposite, Mr. Speaker, is just frankly not constructive to the debate that we need to have. I've said that Correctional Services operates independently, that it can't be interfered with politically. I would also say that we have to be very careful when dealing with the victims of crime that we don't politicize that or attempt to use it in a way other than to ask how we stop victims.
The Honourable Member for Peterborough-Kawartha.
If the Prime Minister is so upset, why won't he stand up and answer this question and talk to the victims' families? If they care so much, then do it. I've said this before. The buck stops with the minister. Stop the blame game. This is people's lives. You are in the government. The Prime Minister, there's no one below that. Again, there is duty here. Either fire the Public Safety Minister or resign. That's it. Those are the options.
I just want to remind the honourable members to place their questions through the chair, not speak directly to each other. The Honourable Government House Leader.
The duty that each of us share as honourable members in this chamber is on behalf of the people that we are fortunate enough to represent, to attempt to the best of our ability to keep them safe, to make sure when they are harmed that we do everything in our power to restore them, and to make sure, yes, Mr. Speaker, that we have a correction system that is free from interference. And why do we say that, Mr. Speaker? Because we have one of the best correctional services systems in the world. And if we're talking about the rightful outrage that we all have in this circumstance, we have to temper it in a mature conversation of how to balance those two priorities, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Haldimand Norfolk.
Mr. Speaker, does this Minister of Public Safety expect us to believe that for 3 months his office withheld information from him about the most notorious murderer and serial rapist in Canada, that he had been transferred to a medium security prison? It's clear the minister likely knew about the transfer in March and did nothing. The entire government likely knew and did nothing about it, including the Prime Minister's office. When will the Prime Minister finally admit that he has lost total control of his cabinet and ask this minister to resign?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I want to begin by taking a moment to express my support for the families of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French, who have no doubt been traumatized time and time again by the decision that was taken under Correctional Services Canada. That's why when I found out on May 30th, I took immediate action to reach out to the Commissioner to express those concerns. And I want to work with all members to make sure that this doesn't happen again. The directions that I have put into motion will ensure that I'm directly briefed and, most importantly, that victims are given advance notice before these decisions are taken in the future. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Haldimand Norfolk.
Mr. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's in town, so why won't he stand and answer these questions? The Minister has misled Canadians before. He has said at least 11 times that law enforcement requested the Emergencies Act. That was false. He said that Bill C-21 wasn't going to ban guns used by hunters and farmers. That was false. He said that Chinese police stations in Canada had been shut down. That was false. Canadians have lost confidence in this minister. So will he do the honourable thing and just resign?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, on each and every one of those priorities, this government has defended public safety in the interests of all Canadians. When it comes to fighting against gun violence, we are banning AR-15s. The Conservatives want to make them legal again. When last year we faced an unprecedented national emergency, we invoked the Emergencies Act, a decision which was validated by Judge Rouleau independently. What did the Conservatives do, Mr. Speaker?
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt. It's starting the noise level starting to build up again, and we're having a hard time hearing the answer. The Honourable Member for Haldimand Norfolk asked a question. She would like to hear the answer. I mean, if there's people yelling behind her, it's very difficult for her to hear. So I'm going to ask the Honourable Member, maybe start off about 15 minutes from the end, or 15 seconds. No, do not take 15 minutes. 15 seconds from the end. If I could have everybody take a deep breath. And now we'll listen to the Minister for about 15 seconds, please.
Mr. Speaker, I think all members will be relieved to hear I won't need 15 minutes, but what I will say is when it comes to fighting gun violence, we're banning AR-15s. The Conservatives want to make them legal again. When it came to the decision to invoke the Emergencies Act, Mr. Speaker, we defended that decision to restore public safety. Conservatives were doubling down, encouraging illegal protesters to stay in the region they should have left. We'll always...
L'honorable député...
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Les Etchemins, Lévis. Hello, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is in Ottawa, but it's interesting because he's not here to answer questions. On the Bernardo case, last week, the Minister of Public Safety feigned surprise about the criminal's transfer from a maximum security prison to a medium security facility. But he had known about it for 3 months, Mr. Speaker. In fact, even the Prime Minister's office knew about it. No one did anything. This is Liberal incompetence at its finest. When will the Minister resign, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, this is a very serious situation. We are all concerned by this tragedy. But, Mr. Speaker, it is important to remember that our corrections system is independent. It is essential that the decision to transfer an offender is a decision made by Correctional Service of Canada. Now, I know that there's a lot of emotion right now. I feel the same, but we need to... The Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Les Etchemins, Lévis. Mr. Speaker, he knew that this dangerous criminal would benefit from a less severe prison. He must also have known that this decision would outrage and worry the victims' families. The Minister of Public Safety does not have a very good track record, what with dubious decisions, backtracking, and statements that are not the truth. So if this government has a leader who sees things clearly and is leading in the best interests of Canadians and victims, let him stand up and throw this minister out. The Honourable Public Safety Minister. Mr. Speaker, our thoughts are with the families and close ones of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French. On May 30th, when I was informed, I took necessary action. And now there is an independent review of what transpired. It is ongoing. Yesterday, I published new directives for correctional services to ensure that families of victims will be informed in situations like this in the future. The Honourable Member for Avignon, Lamitis, Matane, Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, don't ask the Minister of Public Safety about Paul Bernardo's transfer. He doesn't know a thing about it, even though his employees knew. Don't ask the Prime Minister either. He doesn't know a thing about it either, even though his staff knew about it. Just like the Prime Minister didn't know about Beijing's threats against a Conservative politician, even though his employees knew about it. For that matter, don't talk to the Minister of Emergency Preparedness either about the threats. He didn't know a thing about it either, even though his staff knew about it. If you want to talk to someone in the know, talk to an employee. So should employees become ministers? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I take this issue very seriously. That's why, when I was informed on May 30th, I took necessary action. I had a frank conversation with the Correctional Services Commissioner, and that's why I made new directives. There will be directives to protect victims' rights. There need to be directives to clarify that. We will work together with all members of this House to protect victims' rights and to make sensible decisions. The Honourable Member for Avignon, Lamitis, Matane, Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, at this point, it's a pattern. Ministers are constantly telling us that they're not aware of briefing notes that the senior civil service confirms were sent directly to those ministers' staff. Mr. Speaker, we can take them at their word that their staff did not see fit to inform them once, maybe twice. But there comes a point where it's the political equivalent of saying, my dog ate my homework. And these ministers are losing their homework quite often. So when are we going to see some real accountability from them? Because we're starting to worry about the health of the dogs eating all that homework. The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, in the current situation, as I have already explained, staff did receive the information that it was possible that it was a possibility. They didn't receive any concrete details or a decision. And as I've already explained, the decision to transfer an incarcerated individual is an independent choice made by Correctional Services. When it was concluded, when it was decided on, then at the end of May, the Prime Minister was informed. That's the truth, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Avignon, Lamitis, Matane, Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, just because we're laughing doesn't mean it's funny. Ministers have a responsibility to inform themselves and then inform their constituents. Just this spring, in fact, if we had relied on the word of ministers rather than on the reports in the media, 3 members of this House would still be facing threats from China without knowing it. Diplomat Zhao Wei would still be in office. 10 or so constituencies would still be subject to Chinese interference. This is what would have happened without the media if we had relied on ministerial accountability. When will they assume their ministerial responsibilities? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the responsibilities are to identify challenges and then correct course. That's what we did when we issued directives to CSIS. We also issued new directives to Correctional Service Canada in order to correct the situation effectively and efficiently in order to ensure protection of victims' rights and the safety of all.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal government put convicted murderer, kidnapper, and child rapist Paul Bernardo into a medium security prison. Meanwhile, if the PM is in Ottawa, why won't he stand up and answer the beloved questions? Exactly. In 2013, the Conservative government took responsibility when we were faced with exactly the same issue. Paul Bernardo was to be transferred to medium security prison, and the Conservative government of the day said no. The Public Safety Minister, including the Prime Minister himself, have said yes. So, Mr. Speaker, will the minister resign for granting leniency to the most notorious child murderer?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, as I've said many times, as every Canadian knows, the crimes that are in question are amongst the most grievous this country has ever faced. There is not a person who is not impacted by them, who is in this House. I trust that the member cares deeply about it, as do I. But the assertion that this is a decision of the government is false, and it in fact is dangerous. The decision to transfer inmates is a decision of Correctional Services Canada. The independence of our correctional service has been a foundation of our country for a very long time. Having a mature conversation about how we respect that and respect victims is what I think Canadians expect.
I just want to point out to the Honourable Member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies, we've heard your comment. You don't have to repeat it over and over again. It's just not the right time. Please talk to your whip about getting a speaking role. The Honourable Member for Calgary, Nose Hill.
I think it's worth noting that the government has the authority to introduce legislation, such as bills the Conservative Party has just put forward, to ensure that offenders like Paul Bernardo, one of Canada's worst serial rapists, stay in maximum security. That's their job. The Prime Minister's office, the Prime Minister knew about this for 3 months. He has a litany of highly paid staff to tell him about these things. It's preposterous to think that he didn't. His public itinerary today says that he's in the National Capital Region. How come he hasn't informed this House of the Public Safety Minister's resignation?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the member across has made it clear, not just now, but for a long time, her desire for her party to be successful and for their party to form this side. They have to do that through an election, Mr. Speaker. But I will say that on this issue, that the decision that was made is independent, and that if we want to have a conversation about Correctional Services Canada's decisions, that's exactly what we're doing. There is a review taking place. It concludes in 2 weeks. We have asked them to review this decision, and I think that understanding that these decisions are done independently is important. It's been an important foundation of corrections in this country.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
This government has had 8 years to consult, and it shouldn't be a leap of logic to understand that re-victimizing families by these serial rapists, by allowing their transfers out of maximum security prison, is something that the government should have worked to avoid, like they failed with the Terry Lynn McClintock case. This public safety minister, and I mean, if the member looks behind in his caucus, he'll see his caucus cringing. He has the worst record of failure in this government outside of the Prime Minister. How come the Prime Minister, who's in the National Capital Region today, has not informed this?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I think we should choose what we talk about. If we want to talk about the circumstances that are involved in these horrific crimes and how we can responsibly deal with a correction system that's one of the best and most envied in the world.
I'm going to have to stop that, the Honourable Minister. The Honourable Government House Leader from the top, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When we talk about these issues, I would suggest that they require enormous sensitivity. And I am concerned that in every question that they're peppering it with partisan commentary and trying to extract political advantage from this situation, Mr. Speaker. I have attempted, as I've talked about this, to talk about the responsibility. We have one of the greatest correctional services systems in the world. It is admired all over the world, and one of its principal tenets is to not interfere with it politically. And so we all rightfully feel outrage about this transfer. We have great emotion about the crimes that occurred, but we need to deal with that emotion responsibly, Mr. Speaker, and make...
The Honourable Member for Vancouver East.
International students who were victims of unscrupulous immigration agents should not be punished. They've invested everything they have to study in Canada. They've contributed to the economic, cultural, and social fabric of our community. Halting the deportation and removal orders is a good first step. The minister said he's working on a long-term solution. However, what the student needs is a permanent residency status. Will the minister follow up to ensure that an alternate permanent residence pathway is made available to the victims of fraud?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable colleague for her question and her advocacy, along with members of this House that come from all parties that are represented in the House of Commons, to find a solution for innocent victims who were taken advantage of by fraudsters who allowed them to enter Canada on the basis of fraudulent letters of admission. Yesterday, we announced a new path forward, including a task force that would give an opportunity for students to demonstrate that they were not complicit in fraud, but in fact were victims of fraud. They will be given temporary status in Canada to allow them to complete their studies or to continue to work. We've also advanced new measures to ensure they could apply for permanent residency or to remain in Canada without prejudice. That is the right path forward to punish...
The Honourable Member for London Fanshawe.
The London food bag
is seeing its highest turnout ever. People just can't afford the cost of food right now, and major grocers are using inflation as a cover to jack up prices. This government is choosing to protect the profits and greed of major grocers while Canadians' bills skyrocket. The multi-partisan committee released a report stressing how a windfall tax will incentivize large grocers to keep prices low. So will this government implement this windfall tax immediately so Canadians can stop going to food banks and actually afford their groceries?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, we agree with the member, and we know that Canadians are paying far too much for their groceries right now. This is why, not long ago, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry wrote to the Competition Bureau to make sure that the Bureau is using all of the tools it has at its disposal to keep prices down and to prevent businesses from taking advantage of the high prices and profiting off of Canadians. We've also asked the Bureau to look immediately into these matters, and we'll continue to work to make life more affordable for Canadians in all matters.
Here. The Honourable Member for Hamilton Mountain.
Speaker, around the world, we are seeing the rights of 2S LGBTQIA plus people being restricted, even within our own borders. We are seeing extremist groups callously using innocent trans and non-binary children as political targets. The Minister of Labour recently represented Canada at the UN International Labour Organization in Geneva, where he raised this issue. Would the Minister share with the House what he said to this international forum?
The Honourable Minister.
A few days ago, I stood before nations who have attempted to roll back 2S LGBTQI plus rights, and I reminded them that as a gay and married man, I would be jailed or even condemned to death if I happened to have been born in their countries. Nations make progress and they achieve rights in their own time, in their own way, as was the case with Canada, and we respect that. But once those rights are achieved, once they are named, we will not stand by and see them swept under the carpet or put back in the closet or taken away. Not here, not there, not anywhere. Thank you, Mr.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. You know, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and his cabinet have absolutely never taken responsibility for their many acts of bad faith. For example, as Minister for Public Safety alone has misled this House no fewer than 7 times. He even misled a judge by backdating documents. That alone should have led to his dismissal, but he's still with us today. The Liberals have also never shown any sensitivity for the victims of Paul Bernardo. The Prime Minister is in Ottawa. Can he finally tell us that he will dismiss the Minister for Public Safety? The Honourable Minister for Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, it is absolutely false. That question is absolutely false. I called representatives of the families of victims to explain our government solidarity, to express our full support, and now we will work with correctional services to avoid such examples in the future. We have to notify victims before making this kind of decision. That is what we will do in the future. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Correctional Services Canada informed the Prime Minister's office 3 months ago that Paul Bernardo was going to be transferred to a medium security facility. Did anyone at the PMO, decide that perhaps it might be a good idea to communicate with families? Because it seems that no one else thought of victim families when it should be the very first thing to do. The Minister said he did it 2 weeks ago. Why did the Prime Minister not do it 3 months ago? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, with all due respect to my honourable colleague, he does not understand current statutes here in Canada, and these are questions that we have to address. We are ready to work together with all members in this House, but in the meantime, I will be emitting new directives for correctional services to make sure that important things will be done. I will be briefed directly, and that correctional services notify victims when such decisions are made in the future.
For Wellington, Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, an unsealed Justice Department indictment in U.S. court revealed that a Canadian in Vancouver was coerced back to the PRC. It's been 8 months since the first reports about Beijing's illegal police service stations. Beijing brazenly admitted to 5 of these stations, and another 2 have been identified. These stations are being used to coerce people back to the PRC. The minister has indicated that these stations were shut down, but they haven't been. When will they be?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, with great respect for my colleague, he needs to listen carefully to the RCMP, who have consistently updated Canadians that they are taking action in regards to foreign interference that are in association with these so-called police stations. If the Conservatives are serious about fighting foreign interference, they will stop with the partisan attacks. They will support the government's agenda to tackle this issue and do so in a way that is unifying, because we must protect our democratic institutions and, most importantly, Canadians from this phenomenon.
The Honourable Member for Wellington Hills.
Mr. Speaker, that same indictment also revealed that in New York City last summer, PRC agents tried to coerce someone in New York City to come to Toronto for more intensive interrogations. The implication is that Beijing is comfortable using Canada as its foreign interference playground. Maybe that's because 2 months ago, those same PRC agents were arrested. Yet here north of the border, nothing. No arrests, no new legislation. When will the Prime Minister replace this minister with someone who will get the job done?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, we are getting the job done by adding new authorities for our national security establishment, by adding $49 million for the RCMP to protect Canadians from foreign interference, by being on the cusp of introducing a new foreign agent registry.
I'm going to have to break for a second. We're starting to see the volume go up again, and we're hearing individual voices. It's just getting a little bit out of hand, so we're going to take a deep breath and pause a bit. And now we'll ask the Honourable Minister to start from the top, please.
Mr. Speaker, we are getting the job done by making sure that we equip our national security establishment with the tools that they need to fight foreign interference, with additional resources for the RCMP, which we put into the budget, and by raising the bar on transparency through the creation of NCCOP and NCIRA, and by continuing to engage Canadians on this. That's what we're doing. What Conservatives are doing are continuing on with an agenda that focuses on partisan attacks. They should stop that and do the work with all members in this chamber so that we can fight against foreign interference and protect our democratic institutions.
The Honourable Member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, yesterday, 1,300 people found that they were going to lose their jobs yesterday at Bell Media. 6 radio stations are closing their doors. When even a giant like Bell can no longer protect its media and newsrooms, these are serious times. The entire news industry is under threat, as are the people who make it. The Bloc Québécois is proud to have contributed to C11 and C18 essential bills, but I'm sure the Minister agrees that even more needs to be done. In light of these job losses, what is the Minister proposing to better protect the diversity of information? The Honourable Minister for Canadian Heritage. Mr. Speaker, my thoughts are for all those who lost their jobs. It's always worrying when there are job cuts and when radios are closed, when journalists lose their job. And that is why we have been here from the very beginning. We have worked with the Bloc Québécois, we have worked with the NDP to put forward C11 and C18, but the Conservatives have done everything to delay it, everything to try and delay it. Do they now understand that their actions have consequences? The Honourable Member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, this wave of job costs at Bell proves that there is still pessimism about the future, even among the biggest telecommunications giants. So imagine what is the case for smaller entities. We have to ask ourselves whether the current federal programs and the royalties from C18 will really ensure the survival of our news media. The Bloc Québécois is therefore proposing the creation of a dedicated fund separate from current programs, dedicated entirely to protecting news media and newsrooms. I think that's where we are, Mr. Speaker. What does the Minister think about this? Is he ready to work with us to develop such a fund? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the government is always open to new solutions. We'll always examine what we can do better. We created a tax break for media. The Conservatives were against. When we had measures for our various regions, the Conservatives were against. And when we put C18 forward, the Conservatives once again were against. Do they not understand that their actions have real consequences, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. To demonstrate once again his admiration for the basic dictatorship of the Beijing regime, the Prime Minister wanted to contribute himself to its expansion in 2016 by announcing an amount of $250 million to the Asian Investment Bank. We warned the Prime Minister. We saw that there was a trap. The Conservatives saw the trap. One of the bank's leaders has now stated that it was in fact run by the Communist Party in Beijing. Canadians should not have to pay $250 million for the expansion of the Beijing regime. When will the Prime Minister get our money back? The Honourable Minister for Tourism. Mr. Speaker, like the Deputy Prime Minister stated yesterday, in answer to this question, the Government of Canada will immediately put an end to all of its activities with the Asian Investment Bank. And she asked the Department of Finance to carry out an investigation in Canada's participation with the AIB. We also talk on the matter with our allies. The investigation announced yesterday has to be done as rapidly as possible. No result has been excluded as of yet.
Capel. Mr. Speaker, the Liberal-appointed board member on the Asian Infrastructure Bank just resigned, calling it a cesspool and saying that it was controlled by, quote, the Communist Party crowd who operate like a secret police. Who could have seen this coming? Who could have predicted that a bank structured to give Beijing effective control would use the bank to expand the power and influence of the communist regime in Beijing? Who could have possibly seen that coming? Right. Conservatives, that's who. We warned these Liberals not to put tax dollars into the scam of a bank, so when are they getting our money back?
Yes. The Honourable Minister of Tourism.
Speaker, as the Deputy Prime Minister said yesterday, and as I said in this House yesterday, related to this matter, the Government of Canada will immediately halt all government-led activity at the bank, and she has instructed the Department of Finance to lead an immediate review of the allegations raised and of Canada's involvement at the AIIB. The Canadian Government will also be discussing this issue with our allies and partners who are members of the bank. The review is to be undertaken expeditiously. No outcome is being ruled out following this investigation.
For Regina Capel.
Mr. Speaker, nobody likes an I told you so, except for everyone who told you so. Yeah. It wasn't just Conservatives, it was our major security partners like Japan and the United States and foreign affairs experts who all said the same thing, that the communist regime would use the bank to bully developing countries and expand its power and influence. This bank built railways and ports with taxpayers' dollars while Canadians here at home are struggling just to pay the bills. So now that the con has been exposed, will they do the right thing and get Canadians their tax dollars back?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism.
Mr. Speaker, same question, same answer as we said yesterday in this House. And as the Deputy Prime Minister has been very clear, we have ceased all government-led activities with the AIIB. We have asked Finance to conduct an immediate investigation into the activities of the bank. This investigation is to be undertaken expeditiously, and no outcome is being ruled out from this outcome.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Skyview.
Mr. Speaker, countries around the world are racing to seize the extraordinary economic opportunities that come with building a low-carbon economy, investing in clean energy and scaling new technologies. We must ensure that Canadian workers are equipped with the right skills in the right place at the right time. Can the Minister of Natural Resources please share how this government is helping workers capitalize on this opportunity and ensure Canada is a leader in all things energy?
Yay. The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the Honourable Member for his incredible advocacy on these issues. The global race to build...
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources from the top, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my honourable colleague for the question and for his advocacy on these important issues. The global race to build a low-carbon economy is the greatest job creation opportunity of our time. We can either work to seize this opportunity or we can put our heads in the sand and let it pass us by. Having a serious plan to address climate change is required for a serious plan for Canada's economic future. Today, with the tabling of the Sustainable Jobs Act, our government is choosing to seize the moment. This act will create and maintain jobs in communities across Canada by helping workers gain the necessary skills and training to fill the jobs of a low-carbon world. We are building an economy where Canadian workers and businesses will thrive.
Before going to the next question, I just want to remind the honourable member for Calgary Midnapore, it's not polite to try to scream over the voice of someone else. The honourable member for King Vaughan.
Mr. Speaker, the cost of this Prime Minister's Liberal government is driving up the cost of living. The more he spends, the more things cost. According to the latest national rent report, average rent for a two-bedroom apartment in King Vaughan is $2,650, the fifth highest in the GTA. Canadians are sick and tired of this government trying to convince them that they've never had it so good. When will this Liberal Prime Minister show some compassion and stop the out-of-control inflationary spending so Canadians can stay in their homes?
The Honourable Minister for Families.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What Canadians are sick and tired of is the Conservative hypocrisy that they care about affordability for Canadians. Right now in this House, they are holding up Bill C-35, an Act on Early Learning and Childcare. There are only 19 minutes left in debate to get this bill passed through this House and to the Senate. They keep saying they care about affordable childcare, Mr. Speaker, but all they have done is play games, partisan games, to hold it up. When will they finally be honest with Canadians and tell them they don't care about it instead of playing these silly games?
The honourable member for Coast of Bay Central Notre Dame.
Mr. Speaker, fuel companies throughout Atlantic Canada have sent letters to their customers telling them on July 1st, propane is going up 12 cents a litre, gasoline 17 cents a litre, home heating and diesel 20 cents a litre. Folks from Kentville, Antigonish, Sydney, St. John, Fredericton, Edmundston, Corner Brook, Clarenville, CBS, Lab City, and all over PEI have sent me a copy of their letter. Mr. Speaker, will the evil genius who invented carbon tax, number two, please stand up and tell us why he's persecuting Atlantic Canadians?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to remind the honourable member that the Conservative Party of Canada campaign on a platform to implement a clean fuel standard, except that they're all words, we're all action, Mr. Speaker. We've worked with companies across the country to ensure that we can have in Canada lower carbon emitting fuels. We're creating investments across the country in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Quebec, Newfoundland of more than $2 billion in the last year alone in clean fuel, Mr. Speaker. We will continue ensuring that we can create good jobs, have a good economy, and tackle climate change.
The honourable member for Coast of Bays Central Notre Dame.
Mr. Speaker, what a pile of baloney. Canadians know that all they've done is destroy jobs in Canada. The Prime Minister's childhood friend, and he believes the same thing, Premier Fury says that when he asked the federal minister what impact carbon tax 2 would have, he admitted that it won't be zero. No, it won't be zero. It'll be $850 a year per household in Atlantic Canada. Will these Liberals finally admit that carbon tax isn't working, stop persecuting the people who elected them, and end carbon tax?
The Honourable Minister for Northern Development.
Mr. Speaker, you know, I really find it quite rich when I listen to our colleagues on the other side of the House. I'd like to give you a little history lesson, especially from my part of the country. The first thing we did was reopened the Veterans Affairs Office that the other governor closed. The other thing we did, as a coastal community, they had closed down the Coast Guard and search and rescue. We built a new facility, we opened it. Then we raised taxes on the wealthiest. We lowered it on the middle class. We lowered taxes for small businesses twice. We've been there to help people through the pandemic. We're there now helping with dental care, with child care benefits, and helping people turn off coal.
The honourable member for St. John's East.
Mr.
Mr. Speaker, we recognize that raising awareness is one of the most effective ways to combat elder abuse. With today, June 15th, marking World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, could the Minister of Seniors provide an update to the House on the steps being taken by this government to increase awareness and prevention in the mistreatment of senior citizens of Canada?
The Honourable Minister for Seniors.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member from St. John's East for her very important question. Mr. Speaker, any form of elder abuse is a despicable crime, and we take it very seriously. And Mr. Speaker, our government is taking action by supporting over 600 community organizations that help seniors recognize and identify fraud and abuse. Mr. Speaker, by finalizing a definition of elder abuse, by establishing new offenses and penalties in the criminal code related to elder abuse, by investing in better data collection, and to ensure that tragedies like the ones that we saw in the long-term care, so that they never happen again, we welcome the national long-term care standards and are working towards delivering a safe long-term care act. Thank you, Mr.
The Honourable Member for Cowichan, Malahat, Langford.
Mr. Speaker, the Pacheedaht First Nation in my riding doesn't have a school for kids from grades 6 to 12. Every day, children as young as 11 have to bus 75 kilometers each way between home and school on a windy and narrow highway. That's 3 hours a day. Chief Jones came all the way to Ottawa to plead with Indigenous Services and Infrastructure Canada to help. Will the minister honor reconciliation and start working with the Pacheedaht to get this community the school they desperately need?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, since this government was elected, we have worked tirelessly to close the gaping infrastructure gap that the previous Conservative government left. In fact, they underinvested in Indigenous children. They underinvested in Indigenous infrastructure. They did nothing about boil water advisories, Mr. Speaker, for a decade, which left a massive gap of infrastructure across the country, including children's schools. Our government has reversed that trend, Mr. Speaker, and of course, I will work tirelessly to make sure that every community has a school that children can be proud of and safe to learn in.
Bravo. The Honourable Member for Spadina, Fort York.
Mr. Speaker, on June 10th, Canada seized a Russian aircraft at Pearson Airport. Global Affairs Canada said it's working with Ukraine on, quote, options to redistribute this asset to compensate victims of human rights abuses, end quote. Mr. Speaker, why then is the government fighting the families of victims of Flight PS-752 from using an Ontario Superior Court ruling allowing them to seize assets and obtain compensation from Iran? Why is our government protecting a ruthless regime and its murdering IRGC terrorists? Why are they standing with terrorists instead of grieving Canadian families?
Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is an important question, and it gives me the opportunity to talk about two things. First, what we're doing to make sure that the Russian regime is held accountable. Canada is the first country in the world able now to seize and forfeit important assets of the Russian regime. And indeed, we've seen the Antonov plane that has been stranded at the Pearson Airport. When it comes to Iran, we will continue to make sure that the regime itself is held accountable. We've sanctioned the IRGC, we've sanctioned also key leaders, and we'll make sure that the families of the PS-752, with which I've had numerous contacts and numerous meetings, will make sure that they are compensated and will support it. Thank you.
I'm afraid that's all the time we have for question period today. C'est tout le temps que nous avons. We have a point of order for the Honourable Member from Niagara Falls.
Thank you, Speaker. If you seek it, I believe that you will find unanimous consent for the following motion. That notwithstanding any standing order, special order, or usual practice of this House, be Bill C-342, an act to amend the Corrections and Conditional Release Act, maximum security offenders, be deemed read a second time and referred to a committee of the whole, deemed considered in committee of the whole, deemed reported without amendment, deemed concurred in at report stage, and deemed read a third time and passed.
All those opposed to the Honourable Member moving the motion will please say nay. Nay. Unfortunately, we don't have unanimous consent. I have the honour to lay upon the table the House of Commons report to Canadians for 2023. It being 3:18, pursuant to order made on Thursday, June 23rd, 2022, If I can offer a suggestion to the members, if they want to have a discussion, go into the hallway and not shout across the floor. I'm trying to read something very important here, and we're being interrupted. Both of you. Order. Order to both sides. Both. Enough. La Chambre procédera maintenant.
The House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the amendment of Mr. Brock to the motion to concur in the 7th report of the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
Members.
Thank you.